All right. So I think the first question over here will be for Ignasi. I know Ignasi has quite a lot of experience at the technical end and digital space of energy. All right. So uh, when it comes to development of projects, right? What do you think? Just let me read it as it is here. So this question says, how can we build how can we de-risk investments in digital infrastructure, especially in areas like Africa where we are just like trying to kickstart things? Based on your experience, what do you think we should be considering when you talk of probably data centers and the likes?
I mean, projects are projects, right? And I think projects, concentrating on the specific risks for the project, right? And particularly, I think it's quite important to consider all those risks on things you cannot control, right? I mean, are you depending on infrastructure that somebody else is supposed to develop? You know, you can have the best project plan and project development in the world, but if you're depending on what others are doing, that you don't have any direct um, uh, power, whether it be through commercial power or reputational power or a way to make him do other things. Um, uh, you might do the best job in the world and still not have a successful outcome because of it. So understanding that risk and mitigation strategies for the risk, and I say mitigation, I don't say avoidance, because the risks are always going to be there, and you need to have ways to do it. But personally, in any project managers probably I will get on my case. I'm a high level planner. I like high level plans instead of super detailed, because I know that for innovation things tend to change very quickly. So it's about having coping, mitigating strategies, having a plan, but you know that the plan is going to change, right? So I think concentrating and having a good understanding of the risk profile and mitigation strategies is a key thing to do, particularly in places, in instances like you said, without maybe as good as an existing track record in others. When you're doing first of a
Yeah.
kind, you need to try to
Yeah.
understand that mitigation strategy even more.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking of FOAK, first of a kind project, there was this paper from Gale. I mean, sorry, Mission for the Partnership where Gale works at, right? I saw the document around the industrial hubs in Texas and California, right? So I think they had some lessons learned on that. No, no, does Radhika have any addition to that question? I know you're the investor, yeah, so probably you can have some insight for people considering projects.
I think, like I mentioned in my presentation, it is all about reducing risk. There is risk. So I think, Ignasi, you and I share that similar opinion on risk. There's risk in everything. The idea is, how do you mitigate it? How do you reduce the risk of failure? And so, from an investment standpoint, it's how you're going to demonstrate through your project that it's not just a project that you're developing that is a novel thing just for today, but how is it going to be improving and evolving through time? And that continuous innovation is going to be incredibly important from a product development perspective. And then, with these products, what's the demand for that, right? I mean, if you're just developing the product at the end of the day and nobody's going to adopt it, well, it's going to be just an interesting idea at that point. So you want to try to commercialize that and say, well, who's going to want to buy this product? Because otherwise you're just doing a project for the sake of doing a project. And certainly I don't want to deter anybody from that innovation path to say it's not worthy of doing any project, even just to test things out. We've done a lot of that in our venture lab. So, I understand developing something to test something out and to see what the limits are, for example, for a particular technology. But if you're going to want to build a business out of what you're doing from developing that product, then you want to think about customer adoption. You want to think about how you're going to go to market. You want to think about how the demand for that, what you're developing in terms of a solution, is going to stand the test of time. It is probably going to evolve, not unsurprisingly, because markets are dynamic, the customer landscape is dynamic, so everything is dynamic. But in preparing for that future, you're going to definitely need to show how you're going to reduce risk of failure as you're going to, deploy in the market.
Thank you very much. I mean, I agree with you. There was one submission we made recently. I think the first thing that was requested for was offtake agreements, right? So they always want to see the demand side of things regarding projects, right? So just staying with you, Radhika. So this question states, as we scale digital infrastructure, how do we embed cybersecurity, privacy, and ethical AI into our sustainability frameworks, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, we already know that digital tools are getting more rampant across various areas. And I mean, energy is very, very vital for so
Yes,
many people. So, how do we ensure these systems are not compromised or tampered with?
sure.
Uh, yeah.
Um, Great question, and super important to think about. Um, well, we're very big proponents of blockchain as a core. The whole purpose of Web3 based or decentralized technologies is to make it tamper proof. It is to make it sort of immutable. Those who might know anything about blockchain as a technology, and if you don't, I recommend you to read articles and certainly read our book if you're so inclined. We've got particular chapters that are applicable to the power and energy sector. But really, what you want to think about is having a blockchain core that offers immutability, so nobody can manipulate the data. It offers high security, because when you have decentralized ownership. So the difference between distributed and decentralized, I'll just say, is distributed is when you're just distributing it in different locations. You're distributing the data, but you're still probably having one single owner of that data. When you're having truly decentralized architectures, you're having multiple owners of that data. So think if a particular node in a network is compromised, the other nodes can kind of quickly take over, and you're not compromising the entire system as a whole. So you really want to think about use of something like blockchain technology to preserve things like privacy and security. These are very, very sturdy sort of infrastructure and systems that can actually offer a great deal of three things, which is security, compliance, and privacy. Many of the centralized systems are built on, well, the internet technology, and internet technology is based on TCP/IP protocol, which is really a communications protocol. It wasn't designed for anything else. But blockchain as a technology, Web3 based decentralized technologies, were designed for greater security, were designed for greater privacy and certain compliance. So these are areas that I think are incredibly relevant to building any digital infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Radhika. Just to on that question, I don't know if Ignasi has anything to say, because I know some companies might have issues regarding having their data publicly available, right? So I know there was a time when Shell was trying to do something on blockchain, but after a while, I didn't hear much about that, right? So, but I know there are issues about having data public, right? So, I don't know, what do you think have been done? I know there's private blockchain, but still, I don't know, what are your insights regarding that?
So two things come to mind, right? First, what a large company, you talk about Shell, might be doing or not is one thing. What you're going to hear is a part of what they're doing. They're always going to be doing a lot of stuff, and they're going to be trying a lot of stuff. They have the capability of integrating expertise inside their company or buying the best partnership expertise. That doesn't guarantee best thing, but what I mean is they have a lot more options. What I would say is for those who are either small because they're starting as startups or the like, or just there's a small business, it's impossible to be expert in everything, right? So you have to have your own core expertise. And then there is a lot of organizations, there is a lot of institutes and others that can help you get the right best practices in those areas that are not part of your core expertise. You don't need to go and hire an expert in all fields. There is, in some areas, like the same thing as Radhika was showing in funding, is the same thing for access to all kinds of technical expertise. Some areas there is a lot more. In some areas there is not as much. Fortunately, in digital, anything that is digital, you can access expertise in a lot of the world. You're much less geography constrained than in other areas. So I'd say look for partnerships, look for others that are core experts at that, and try to use that best practice. You're not going to get it right all the time, but instead of trying to build your own, I really believe in not reinventing wheels and try to understand what works and using that. And I think this is an area that is quite important to do. And don't believe the hype, don't believe the headlines. Large companies, others, it's part of sometimes there is trying to distract others with what you're doing and not doing. And large companies are particularly good at doing that, right? Because they have to play against others, or they have to compete against others. So there's always not knowing what's really there.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Ignasi. Right. So just staying with you, this went more about the sustainability side of projects, right? And I know you touched on that regarding data centers. So I mean, right now, data centers are contributing 1.5% of emissions to I mean global landscape, and is increasing rapidly, right? And so, what do you think regarding certifications of projects? Are they essential enough to measure sustainability? And what kind of energy technologies do you think should be used to build data centers of the future? Because I think there is no stopping building of data centers. They will keep on expanding in decades to come, right? So, which energy source do you recommend regarding construction of those facilities?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Two or three thoughts there. I'm a chemical engineer, right? So as a chemical engineer, we've dealt with the difficulty of scaling up new technologies, because it's the how things work at small scale, starting in the lab to then in a pilot plant to then in a commercial, is quite different. And it's not just a matter of making the same thing bigger and it's going to work. It's not a linear scale up. It's more complex and complicated than that. I think the physical side of the digital is going through a similar a transformation in which that scale up of the physical assets to support the digital infrastructure is hitting an inflection point in which doing more of the same is not just realistic. It's just too much. There was a conversation, it was on the news about a couple months ago, in which there was a bit of a back and forth. I think it was between one of the AI companies and Samsung about some of the demands of the AI companies, as in how much data centers are needed, was totally unrealistic. It's like, yeah, this is not something, this linear scale up, just adding capacity is not realistic. It has to be more about making it different. So I think it's not just about building more data centers of same and putting more energy. The energy efficiency of the data centers, particularly, and I'll make a disclosure here because it's a partial conflict of interest. So the cooling is one of the large energy requirements of data centers. It's not just about running the computers; it's about running them cool enough. I have to disclose, Refinity is a subsidiary of Inventure, and Inventure has another company in its portfolio called Excelsius that is in the data center cooling business. So I'm not totally a neutral party to this, but I think understanding these new cooling technologies, these new ways to address is important. It's about data, it's about energy generation, it's about cooling, it's about understanding those characteristics. And I would say beyond that, finding the right connectivity between a data center and other users and generators of electricity is important. So I think we haven't been, particularly good at connecting assets of different industries of different characteristics to take advantage of when one needs and what the other does, right? So, for example, we talk about data centers and nuclear. Well, data center energy demand is not necessarily a flat out. It depends on what is being done. Well, nuclear needs to run flat out. So, how we can combine those different assets so that there is a better connectivity, is a better ways to do it. I think those are important, finding those externalities, both in the positive and negative, for the different assets and how to combine things. Rapidly, this becomes billions and billions and very large things. So it becomes large projects, and that's a very different world and very difficult world. So I believe a lot of the headlines you see on data centers, on energy generation, are going to end up just as headlines, as most of the large projects that gets announced never get built. And that doesn't mean nothing is happening. It's just, it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot easier to put a headline announcing the investment of billions of dollars than to actually get those projects to completion. So that's a bit of an insight.
Okay. Thank you, Ignasi. I mean, recently the International Energy Agency, they released like a global tracker for AI and energy assets around the globe, right? And I think one thing they're trying to track is energy source for AI infrastructure. And I mean, just like, I mean, you talk about the headlines, the one from the Middle East. I think that was like the very, very big one. A lot of US companies, India, NVIDIA, right? Trying to build, I think 5 gigawatts in Saudi Arabia data centers, right? So, I mean, people are concerned that, okay, is it just going to be possible powering this kind of infrastructure? Because that's very massive. And I think the argument is that, I mean, AI centers are built on large energy profiles, right? So if they have the energy source, people just believe that they will just use the fossil to power such infrastructure. So I guess there are some questions around the kind of tools that we use on such projects, right? But I think, I mean, just like you said, we'll wait and see what happens. We'll believe that it goes on in a very sustainable fashion. I think Radhika wants to say something on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think energy consumption is something that we think about a lot. If you think about any of these advanced technologies, I mean, blockchain, I think, has actually turned out much, much better in the long haul, since some of the basic infrastructure. I mean, Bitcoin certainly has a lot of energy consumptive sort of profiles, but Ethereum has come a long way now and is very energy efficient. So thankfully, there are some progresses. The same thing goes for AI. I think, we've really got to think about more sustainable ways of doing the kinds of things that we can do. And, interestingly enough, maybe AI can actually help, in the efficient management of these assets. I think that's really where it might be able to, you might be able to mitigate some of that energy consumption in compute power. But all of these technologies just, we've got to think about things for future proofing that energy footprint. That's not something that is easy to do. Everything is power hungry at the moment, and it's unsustainable in that power hungriness. We're going to be depleting resources very, very quickly. So to Ignasi's point, I think thinking about alternative sources of energy, how do we distribute this in a different way? How do you use decentralized, even peer-to-peer systems, even as you're translating across different asset categories, thinking about peer-to-peer systems and thinking about how people can actually become sort of mini energy grids on their own. I mean, this is a way, we often talk about this, we discuss this extensively in our book, which is, how do you take advantage of peer-to-peer systems where consumers can become prosumers, or centers can contribute back to the grid. So these are ways that I think the power consumption is there, but if we can more intelligently develop decentralized types of systems that can empower individuals or communities to start contributing back to the energy grid, I think that's a much more sustainable path. So there's a lot to do in this arena. The opportunities are there, and so to any of you that are looking at projects, think about those kinds of projects that are going to be very difficult and challenging, but therein lies the ingenuity. So for people that are in this conference or are watching it afterward, think about maybe leveraging some of your own backgrounds and interests to really solving some of these bigger problems. And I'll tell you that when you can solve the energy problem, everybody wins. So I think it's not something easy, not trivial, but it is something where we need innovation, we need ingenuity, and we need everyone to participate in the creation of these innovative solutions. So I would say entrepreneurs are very much part of this conversation. As investors, definitely we're looking at the next generation of entrepreneurs that are willing to tackle these very, very large problems. But also, to Ignasi's point, when you're thinking about large corporations, people that are looking at innovative ways of doing things and have to partner with others, it's going to be this ecosystem that we're going to create around this. We can't get away from the power hungry structures that we have. We do need them, and we're seeing that proliferate. So we're going to have to think about more intelligent management and more empowerment in this ecosystem so that we can actually not just consume, but also contribute back to the grids.
Thank you very much. I think we'll be wrapping up now. Just the last one for you, Radhika. So, when it comes to digital tools, right? I mean, I've seen people talk about it here that, oh, I mean, investors just want something digital just because it's very fancy. I mean, so someone said, okay, for instance, for farmers who are on their farmland, like they wonder, like, how does this tool actually like improve their work on site? That maybe just like the hype around it is just the investors trying to move into markets. So you see digital tools for farming, digital tools for climate and the like, right? So I just want you to clarify something regarding that. People always see it as just people jumping on hype regarding when it comes to sectors and the likes, right? So just one word, I mean, or one sentence or two regarding digital tools just being an hype.
Um, you know, Hype cycles always exist in the advent of any new technology. So this is not something we need to be afraid of. We do need to think about adoption curves. Past a hype cycle, it no longer becomes hyped. From an investment perspective, we think that, the best basically weather the storms. Initially, there are going to be hype cycles. There was hype cycles around the internet. And eventually we got past the hype cycle of the internet and it became something that was ubiquitously used. Same thing goes for, any of the new waves of technologies that they're seeing. Even mobile technology was a hype at some point, right? And so the nature of emerging technologies kind of necessitates a hype cycle, unfortunately. And it's really the shiny new object, right? That's the syndrome. Is you see a shiny new object, it's a shiny new technology. Everybody wants to get in on the action. There's a lot of excitement around it, and that causes that frothiness and hype. At the end of the day, we always, from at least from an investor perspective, I know that I look at that and I go, well, it's not about the hype, it's about the underlying technology. Is there something fundamentally valuable that you're working on, that the big problems that you're trying to tackle? Those are, I think, really important regardless. And those are going to be the ones that are going to transcend the hype cycles and get out of those tricycles. If you're doing something that is really so critically important, and this again comes back to the must-haves rather than the nice to have, right? You might have heard those terms. Don't develop something that's just nice to have, because that's not going to sustain in the long term, right? When you're really developing a sustainable project for the longevity, you're really wanting to tackle things that are A, non-trivial, B, big problems that are pervasive problems that you're trying to solve. And those will transcend the hype cycles. So I think that's really the takeaway that I have.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So finally, for this panel, I would have Ignasi. So this final question, about the energy of the future, right? So when you touched on nuclear, there's a lot of
Yep.
safety concerns around nuclear, right? And I mean, the whole Israel-Iran war, right? And even for countries like Nigeria, I don't think we have anything on nuclear, and although we have a plan, right? So, but I think safety plays a very, very crucial role in these kind of things. And even the same with hydrogen, there are also safety issues around hydrogen in terms of the combustibility and the like. So, and Radhika talked about the need for innovation, right? We need entrepreneurs that would go into this area and bring down energy costs and ensure it's much more affordable for everyone. So what do you see around safety for all these new systems? And what do you think we have to put in place before we can deploy these new technologies at scale?
I mean, it's undeniable, right? And trying to downplay security concerns around nuclear is doing a disservice to even the expansion of nuclear, right? It has to be done right. It has to be addressed properly. There is a track record, and the track record is very good on uses of, and I'm talking about civilian power generation. I'm not talking about military applications. When you're going around plutonium, the things change, right? Uh, the safety aspects of this newer generation of reactors, whether it be at the larger scale or the small modular reactors, is much better. There is inherently safe by design, and there's been a lot of enhancements to them. So I would say, um, on a, operationally, it's quite addressed. There is still the issue of spent fuel and what to do with that. People are working. There is a minimizing of it, but there is a real concern. What do we do? End of life concerns are available in any industry in any way. There's no ways escaping second law of thermodynamics. And the other thing that I was going to bring up on nuclear very quickly, and I made a reference to it, and it also connects to the project development that we talked about before, is where nuclear has a very negative track record is about cost and time overruns on their projects. I read a very interesting book in the last year. It's a couple of years old book by a Danish professor on Oxford called "How Big Things Get Done." It's about large projects, and this guy and his students have a database of large projects and classified large projects, cost and time overruns. And they found that two kinds of projects have the worst track record in terms of over budget and over time: nuclear power plants and the Olympics. So those type of projects have had something behind them. And I would advise all of you guys, How Big Things Get Done is a very interesting, is a quick read on large projects, and it was a lot of insight. So I'll leave that. There is a project and there is a commercial questions about nuclear projects that needs to be resolved. Some people say, well, regulatory this and that. Well, the same thing happens in China. China knows how to play regulations just right when they have a strategic initiative, and nuclear power plants have very similar delays and cost overruns in there. So it's something beyond just strict regulation that we need to resolve. So I would say we still need how to do it properly from a project perspective. And I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Ignasi and Radhika. It's so great, I mean, having this discussion with you, and I really hope people have learned one or two things from what you've said. I mean, definitely the digital future is here, and we have to power it with energy. All right. And I think innovation is something that's